how far up the family tree, if you will, how far up does that go from Luther's Reformation? Because I think people hear a German church, German theology, they hear German church, German theology, they inevitably bring up Martin Luther.
Yeah, it's a great question. So Luther is, I think, really well understood, not as one of the first modern theological figures, but really one of the last medieval theological figures. Luther is very much a product of the world of Europe in the 16th century, and very much a product of the world created by the Holy Roman Empire. There was, at that time, across Europe, this kind of two swords doctrine, the idea that the emperor would wield the sword of state and the pope would wield the sword of the church. And together they would defend this loose conglomerate of kingdoms and surrogate leaders and that sort of thing that had some level of subordination to the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor. But as you can imagine, something that was in some ways that ill-defined and vague, and in other ways that far away from the life experience of most everyday people, Europe at that time was really ripe for dissent and reform. And so Luther is not the first figure to gather a following and try to break away from some of the imperial practices of the Holy Roman Empire and some of the institutional practices of what we now call the Catholic Church. There was Jan Hus in Bohemia. There was John Wycliffe in England. But where Luther succeeded, where these other reformers did not, is that Luther had a lot of support from the princes in Germany. In fact, he hid in one of the castles owned by one of the, I think it was the Elector of Saxony, if I'm not mistaken. I have to remember my history, but the Wartburg Castle, when he was being pursued after he burned his papal bull for his nailing 95 Theses onto the Wittenberg Church castle. And when he was hiding in the Wartburg, he did his first German vernacular translation of the New Testament. And so there is, with Luther, a spirit of putting Scripture back into the hands of the people. There is a spirit of wrestling Scripture out of what he regarded as its capture by a growing incrustation of tradition that rather than being a faithful continuation and outflowing of the gospel, the good news in the Bible, he regarded as a kind of sort of like a shell growing around the Bible, sort of a bushel, if you will, growing around the light of Scripture. And it wasn't that Luther that he wanted to divorce Scripture from tradition. He was a smart person, and he understood that tradition forms and informs the way that all Christians read Scripture. But what he wanted to do was to distinguish between Scripture and tradition and to elevate Scripture into a position in the life of the church and of Christians to critique and reform the tradition.